Thank you for the very kind introduction, and thank you all for the warm welcome. My husband Rez and I got here hours ago. We got here this morning, and it's just been such a lovely full day. So we're thrilled to be here, and I feel just as honored to get to meet all of you today. So I have a confession. I was a reluctant entrepreneur. I didn't pursue entrepreneurship until I had to. I grew up thinking that there was a divide in the world between business, and people doing good things. I thought people in business were self-centered and trying to get resources just for themselves and trick other people into buying stuff they didn't need. I was not a fan. And in fact, I thought entrepreneurs were the worst. They were the gang leaders. They were starting new businesses. I had no desire to be any part of it. I studied in college, I studied philosophy and political science and poetry, not entrepreneurship, not business, nothing like that. I was not interested. But I did grow up in a family that instilled in me a desire to be of service to those around me. I grew up in a religious family and still carry those values and that sense of purpose and meaning in my life with me today. And so I wanted to be useful. And as I looked around to try to be useful in the world after I graduated from college, I thought, well, business, no. I'll go try to find a great nonprofit or NGO to work for. So that search kind of led me, not necessarily to a nonprofit job, but to a temp job at Stanford. It just turned out to be in this Center for Social Innovation. I had no idea if that would really actually be a good place for me, but I ended up landing as a temp admin assistant, planning events and doing work that wasn't related even to my big dreams of saving the world. But it gave me access and exposure to this strange idea. It was strange to me at the time, which was that business skills and entrepreneurial thinking could actually maybe be useful in solving some of the problems that I saw so many people suffering from all around the planet. And I became a convert. I decided that maybe business wasn't so bad. Maybe it could be a force for good in the world. I didn't exactly know how to start though, and mostly I wanted to see how microfinance, particularly microcredit, could be useful in the lives of people that had a whole different set of access to capital or lack of access to capital and experiences than I had had growing up. So I flung myself into an unpaid internship. I moved to Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania for a project for a few months, and I spent time doing a very important thing, and what I think is the fundamental thing you always should start with any startup, any venture, anything where you think you can walk in and be useful. I listened to people. I listened to hundreds of entrepreneurs in very small villages all throughout, rural areas in East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, like I said, also Rwanda, Burundi, and I heard their stories. I had heard a lot growing up about people living in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, and a lot of other majority world places that did not talk at all about entrepreneurship. They talked about the stories, talked about sadness and suffering and great need, because the stories were told to me by well-intentioned NGOs that wanted me, middle-class American person, to donate money to the cause, help them do their work, and then go do something else with my days. I found, as I sat and listened to the people that I actually wanted to be useful to, I heard a different story. I heard a new story, and I heard a story of entrepreneurship. I was super inspired by those stories of strength and of often overcoming a lot of challenges despite lack of access to resources. And I felt so inspired to understand what they needed next. And a lot of them said to me, well, if I had $10, $20, $100, not a lot, I could do the next thing. And I will pause for a minute because I want to tell you what happened then was I started to ask those all-important what-if questions that you ask at the beginning of any idea that becomes its own thing. It becomes its own kind of life form, its own startup, its own organization. I started to ask, okay, I'm meeting people who have a different story than I thought they did. They have a story of entrepreneurship already. I thought they wanted me or somebody like me to play the role of donor. and to give money and then go on with my life and not to be involved, which didn't sound very fun to me, but that's what I thought. That's what I thought I was supposed to do. But I said, what if these individuals that I'm meeting, what if they have an entrepreneurial journey that can be accelerated? What if instead of me donating to somebody, over here that then trickles through an organization, what if it could be a direct sort of connection, not just in a transaction, but like an interaction? What if there could be a direct connection and interaction? And what if it was a loan instead of a donation? Because a lot of folks told me they wanted a loan. They wanted to own their own success. They wanted to take that capital, use it, and then pay it back so that they had freedom, emotional and otherwise. They owned what they were building. And I noticed that it was this moment in time. This is way back. We were talking about timelines because my new friend over here is actually apparently kind of an old friend because he was seeing Kiva unfold way back almost 20 years ago, 2005. So in 2005, in that moment, technology was just at this place, just on the cusp of being so ever present. Mobile technology, but also just internet connections, not in every village, but in a lot of trading centers and places that were a bicycle ride away. There was this moment when technology made it possible to stay in touch, to stay connected, and to do some of the things that we were dreaming of doing. What's strange is these small what-if questions, I had never done that before. I'd never started to form an idea about what I could do. I was often looking to other people in charge or to other organizations to join their work. Again, I was right out of undergraduate. I was 24. So I thought I should listen and learn a lot first, which is always a fine thing to do. But it turns out that I was seeing things that were new and true in that moment. These anomalies to the existing paradigm, these things that could maybe be clues about how the world was about to change. And so myself and my co-founder, Matt, kind of put these insights and anomalies together and said, okay, the big what if, right? What if we provide loans directly to other human beings without going through big institutions and having lots of different steps? What if these loans are interest-free? Wouldn't that be a nice experience for the person that otherwise would donate? I mean, oops. And then what if we stayed in touch using all of this great technology that seems to be getting into the right places right now? And so they were very simple questions. That became the first startup that I got to be part of, Kiva. And that first round of loans, and I take my time on this part because, look, I've sat in a lot of rooms like this. I've listened to a lot of people tell their stories. And I think when you're 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road from the beginnings of the story, it's very easy to make it sound fancy. It's very easy to make it sound polished and grand. And the truth is, my experience is that beginnings are scrappy, they are messy, you do not know all the answers, you are feeling your way in the dark, figuring it out as you go. So in the beginning, even though since that time a lot of stories and case studies have been written about the beginnings of Kiva that some of them make it sound fancy. It was not fancy. It was very, very humble, very simple. We tried with just 7 people at first, 7 people. We tried to ask what their loan needs might be. We didn't have a lot of technology in place. We weren't proving a lot of anything other than just starting to turn that wheel, starting to get things moving. And we loaned, with the help of friends and family, like handing us cash, because again, we didn't have online payment processing. We didn't have anything. My grandmother handed me a 20 and said, give it to that person on the website. It's very funny. But we transferred about $3,000 total to 7 individuals. That was our launch. That was our first round of loans. But it was enough to get started. And it was enough to use different language around it. It's one thing to say, oh, we have this idea. Someday we want to go do these things and talk about it in the future tense. But once you start and you're able to say, we do this. This is what we do. This is who we are. Do you want to join us? It's a very different, more powerful thing, right? So it allowed us to start to live in this space and use that language. And that first round of loans was 7 entrepreneurs and $3,000. About 6 months later, they repaid. All on time, all completely. It was great. We said, okay, I guess our experiment worked. Let's do this again. We actually got a simple website up. We emailed our friends and family and said, we're doing this again. Here's another 15, 20 borrowers. We did more rounds of loans again and again. That first official year, we went from a $3,000 pilot to 500,000 almost to the day, 500,000 in loans in 4 different countries over the first year. And then the next year it was 15 million, and the next year it was 40 million, and the next year was 100. And it's well over $2 billion today, many years later. But it's from individuals all over the world reading stories. I think more respectful, more authentic, more real stories of entrepreneurs in, I don't know, over 90 countries, I think, borrowers. But if you look at lenders, they're all over. So 90-ish countries. Stories of people who want to take that next step in their own entrepreneurial journeys, who are right at the beginning, who might be in that scrappy, uncertain first phase of trying to change the way that they live, to live and work and think entrepreneurially. But people come to the site and with $25 or $50 or more, they chip into those loan needs, and it's grown over time. So that was my first accidental foray into entrepreneurship. I've obviously reflected a lot since then. It was almost 20 years ago, and I've gotten to do other ventures, and I'm so grateful that for me, if I'm selfish, if I look at things just through that lens of focusing on my own experience, Kiva was such a gift to me because it convinced me that I really could build real things in the world. It convinced me that I could be like those individuals that I met that became my heroes. I could be an entrepreneur too. And as I've then gone on to teach and write and lecture a lot about entrepreneurship, I come back to, it's funny, the more time that passes, the more I come back to these basic truths that I think are so powerful. There's a definition of entrepreneurship that's my very, very favorite, and there's, everyone in this room could probably have their own wonderful definition of what it means to be an entrepreneur. But there's a definition that I go back to a lot. It's a definition by Howard Stevenson, a Harvard Business School professor, and he says, entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. It sounds very boring and academic, but just trust me, I think it's like romantic and beautiful and like inspiring. So let's break it down. So he says, entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources that currently controlled. So what I love about this, despite the fact that most of my career in the last 20 years has been moving resources into the hands of entrepreneurs, whether they want to become that or they're already on their path, despite that, I think the greatest entrepreneurs and the ones that inspired me at the beginning of the journey figure out how to move forward, to pursue the thing that they want to pursue, to make the vision that's in their head, the imaginary invisible picture of what they want the future to be. They figure out how to pursue that opportunity, even when you have those days or those months or those years where you don't have access to everything on your wish list. Those entrepreneurs, those are the greatest entrepreneurs in my mind, and I think there's an element of that in every successful entrepreneur that I've ever encountered. It'd be so great to always have every dollar, every hire, every access to every piece of technology, every insight and piece of information, all the resources that we might dream up every day would really be, that would be the thing. If we only had these things, we'd be able to move forward. Great entrepreneurs figure it out. They figure out how to go over, around, and through, and they do their best to access what they need, but sometimes they do it in really creative and non-traditional ways. And for me, part of what I've loved working, especially in crowdfunding, not just microfinance, but pairing that with crowdfunding, to me it unlocks this magical piece that is an amplifier and an accelerator of capital, but it's community. So the most beautiful thing, I think, when I look at Kiva, and I feel like I'm a mom, Reza and I, we have 4 little kids, miss them so much. But I feel like I'm like a grandparent maybe with Kiva, because I'm not changing diapers every day. I'm just kind of watching from afar, and I'm so proud of it, and it's all grown up. Why did I say all that? Because when I look at it, I think one of the most beautiful things, yes, it's great to say those big numbers. That's fine. It's wonderful. But it's wonderful because of the stories behind it. It's wonderful because of the individuals, the people that represents, that are hearing different stories of potential and progress, more stories of, I think, equality and partnership. There's always a place, there always will be a place, I believe, for charity. But this is not charity, this is partnership. This is, Money goes over, is utilized, and comes on back. I think on Q it's still around 98.5% of the time historically, so it's super high. I attribute that to this wonderful combination of capital and community, whether it's a handful of people or sometimes it'll take dozens and dozens of people to fulfill a loan need of an individual. But I think it's an incredibly powerful combination. I have so many thoughts. I want to talk so much about everything. Let me see how I am on time, because I want to shift into talking about so many of the people I see sitting before me, women in entrepreneurship. So our dear friend Julia Borston just wrote a book called When Women Lead, and it is this treasure trove of amazing, empowering, deeply inspiring statistics about, and no offense to my friends who do not identify as female in this room, as women, but there are some incredible advantages that many women who pursue entrepreneurship end up having, whether it's intentional or not. Even though women often start their businesses with about half the amount of capital that men do, right? So that's a lot to unpack just there. That can be a great advantage, figuring it out without regard, right? Without regard to the resources you might need at any moment, they're figuring it out. However, it often means, and again, good, bad, we can debate. It often means their businesses grow a little bit more slowly, and they don't or can't or shut out of access to traditional capital to grow more quickly. But for every dollar invested in women, even though it's only 2% of venture capital, which is appalling. It's appalling, and it has to change. It's one of the reasons I, again, reluctantly kind of got into venture. For every dollar invested, I'm saying dollar, for every dollar invested in women, it comes back 2x more than men. And so why is that? We could have lots of theories, but women are often by nature more inclusive, more aware of community, and they utilize community. They work in partnership more readily, and it's more of an instinct, a reflex to do so. And those things are really advantageous, it turns out. And I also think coming from the world of social impact, and it's fascinating. I think we're at another really important moment and an important inflection point with impact. More and more, I see friends, colleagues, and just folks that I'm watching and paying attention to all throughout business, suddenly, took a while, but suddenly paying more attention to ESG factors and to incorporating CSR. I'm using a lot of acronyms, but I know we all know this stuff, into their work, because the data shows that it actually pays off. And if it feels intimidating, I think the best way that I think about it is there's this myth of neutrality around impact. Every person and every group of people, every organization has an impact, has a social impact, whether it's good or bad or somewhere in the middle. And so those that are talking about and thinking about and being proactive, saying, hey, we understand this is part of doing business. We want to have this kind of impact. We want to be proactive. To me, they're forward thinking. They're sort of ahead of the game, right? It's going to happen anyway. You might as well be on top of it. And they're thinking the most comprehensively about risk and opportunity. So we can talk impact, but I've noticed that a lot of folks in leadership positions, it's funny, whether they are naming it as such or not, there's a trend over the last few months, in the US at least, where a lot of leaders are sort of removing the language around programs they've set up around impact, but they're still doing the same behaviors, and they still have the same policies and some of the same programs in action. It's just so clear to them that it needs to be incorporated widely. It's not a special side project of their venture. It's woven in. It's interesting. Okay, I wanted to talk about entrepreneurship. I wanted to talk about women. I wanted to talk about impact a tiny bit, or at least share a few thoughts to kick it off. I think that's about 20 minutes. Listen, I can keep talking. It's a double-edged sword here. It's a blessing and a curse. So I can keep talking away, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking about, answer questions, or just hear hear from you what's interesting for you.
Maybe a little bit of advice to startup companies.
Yeah.
How to engage with
Yeah.
investors. What are they looking for? What are the tips
Yep.
in negotiation? Obviously not too detailed, but just to put them into the right direction, especially before the big day tomorrow.
Yep. So this is unsolicited. And again, I don't mean to overly focus on women, but I actually do mean to focus over. It's time we do that for once. Anyway, I will say I learned something. One of the best things I learned in business school was a mind trick about negotiating. So often women are much more hesitant than men to ask for, a raise or the capital that they need, whatever it is that they need. And they operate, again, there are great qualities to this. They operate out of gratitude in a different way. There's a whole set of other statistics to discuss. But I was given this advice in like a Saturday workshop. It wasn't even in a normal class. It was just this workshop on women and negotiations. And the trick is when women, instead of thinking, I need to ask for more money or more of something for me, for myself, as soon as you can shift and think about who else you're fighting for, whether it's family or your kids or your loved ones or your team, you become a different level of power and confidence in your negotiations. So I've used that since then. It's one of the most powerful small things that I got out of my 2-year MBA. So I'll say that now. If you have trouble asking for what you need, think about it. You're mama bear. You're asking for the people that you're out there representing. Okay, but as both an entrepreneur and an investor, I need another cliche. I need another saying, like both sides of the table, but I've sat on both sides of the table. And often as an entrepreneur, if I may be honest, I'm inside just rolling my eyes because so many venture capitalists will tell you a lot about themselves and a lot about why they're so different and a lot about why their capital is so shiny and special and wonderful and all the value they're going to add. And I get it. Yes, thank you. Yes. But I think as the entrepreneur, of course, the buck stops with you. You are going to be the main driver of the success of your business. And I think being able to, but remembering that venture capitalist, that funder also has a job. Their job is to find the best possible investments they can make. They need you. So again, mindset shift, not just thinking, I hope this person helps me start my company or helps us keep going. Yeah. Great, of course, it's wonderful to have that attitude of appreciation, but remember that they need you too. So go in confident. They need to. It's their job to find great investments. In the very beginning, right, there's sort of this balance between story, like what are you going to do, and what have you done over time? Did that story prove out? In the beginning, I think my best advice is to be incredibly thoughtful and honest with yourself about the whole story of where you are, who you are, and why you in particular are best suited to pursue this opportunity right now in time. There was a study done, anyone familiar with the Bill Gross study at Idea Lab in Pasadena? Is ringing any bells? No? Anyway, he studied all the factors that end up leading to a successful outcome of a startup. The number one factor is timing. Number one. It's really unexpected, I think. So are you doing this thing, this new venture, at the right moment in time? So zoom out a little bit. Look at the story that's happening in the world. What are all the factors? What are the trends? What are the waves coming in your direction that are going to help push you along, that are going to give you extra advantage, extra momentum? So story of sort of context world, and build that story really solidly. Paint that picture. Then paint the picture, tell the story of the venture that you believe should exist. Make your case for why this should exist right now in that world that you've built. And then, I think this is the most fun, tell the story of why you and your team are the people to do it. Yes, lots of other people theoretically could come in and do that thing, but each of us has a unique combination of experiences and insights and perspectives and strengths and all of that. So to bring that in for your story, for why the world is ready, why this venture is the right thing to do next, and why you are the right person to build it. I think when you can tell a solid story about those pieces, it's incredibly powerful. I also think it's a really, look, this is a little humbling, but so even though I'd done a number of startups, I ended up, for my last startup, doing Y Combinator. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about. But I have to tell you, it was a very interesting experience. There were no other 40-something mothers of 4 in the class, in the cohort. It was a lot of like younger people than me, a lot of young men doing mostly tech startups, at least tech-enabled startups. But one of the things that I did in this accelerator, and I'm so grateful for it, there was this set of questions where we had to answer, how will your business become $1 billion business? Look, I have a whole set of thoughts on why the venture track and those metrics may fit for some and may not fit for others, and that's fine. Maybe your business isn't meant to be that. Maybe it's meant to be something different. And maybe venture all the way is not the path. There's so many options, right? We want to talk about this too. But that forcing function to say, is there something here that's big enough to justify the incredibly difficult journey that entrepreneurship is, and to justify the investment capital that you might be seeking, whether it's friends and family, crowdfunding, or anything else, whether you're getting out a loan, whatever it is. I think forcing yourself to really look at, is this a big enough idea? Can it really scale? And how much? What's really realistic? Don't look at and don't make up, vanity metrics like, oh, theoretically, or looking at market sizes that are unrealistic. Everyone just wants, I think, like a reasonable and accurate and fair sort of estimation of all those story layers and what you're really going to go do and how big you believe it could get. And bigger isn't, in my opinion, bigger isn't always better. If it's a wonderful solution to a problem that is serving enough people to justify its existence, I think that's really exciting. I have so many other pieces of advice. I can go there, or I can pause and see if there's any other places we want to go with this.
I just wanted to comment on something that probably proves wrong to those who are sitting here, and most of the startups that we chose. There is a saying or assumption, if there is a social startup or social project, it doesn't have any money.
Oh, let's get into that.
Or no profit whatsoever. I think you are a very good example of the fact that you can still serve the society, still make a very good profit and a business behind that. So I think you guys have to really look for the cases, successful cases, and that's probably the real example of how we can turn the social entrepreneurship into something.
Yes, 100%. So, okay, this is like lecture number 2 in my social entrepreneurship class at USC. It's great. No, I love it. I love this. I mean, it's my favorite. So this is what I tell my students. I'm going back to my old, where did I point? Did I point this way for the pursuit of opportunity? Right, what's that? Where are you running? And what are you disregarding to just run after your dream? When you have your goal of who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, what value you want to create, then you ask the question, well, what vehicle is the best one to get me there? Do I want to go fast or slow? What kind of fuel do I need? Where do I get that fuel? How will I get that fuel, that capital, whatever else you need? What's the road like? Do I know a lot? Do I have a lot of information? Is it a clear, straight path without a lot of things to weave around? Or is it in the middle of a storm up a mountain? My analogy does break down at some point, but so far so good. Anyway, I tell my students, look, be clear on your goal and what you want to go build, and then figure out the right structure. I actually think that the traditional for-profit structure has a lot of problems. I think the traditional 501c3 or NGO path has issues. I think hybrids can be pretty amazing. I'm actually writing a book right now that explores the power, actually, that a lot of nonprofits have in getting things done that a lot of traditional for-profits don't even think about. I think there are superpowers built into organizations that have that structure. But you can get great things done in either structure, and you can access different sources of capital and find different other benefits, advantages, and challenges in each structure. But it is not the case that the value that you're creating is different. In a for-profit, it's a closed loop. You make the product, You find the buyer for the product, and they're the recipient of the product too. It's a closed cycle. It's very straightforward. We all know this, right? I make shoes. You want my shoes? Pay me for the shoes. You get them? Great. In a nonprofit, it's broken open. But it's still, you're creating value. You make shoes. This person needs the shoes and can't pay. A donor comes in and buys that product for someone else to have, right? So it's just a broken open system, but you're still creating something of value, and you're still capturing value and giving that value to someone else. Just you need to get it paid for in another way, capture the capital in another way. I say all this because it's not that goal of serving this person that cannot pay versus this person that can pay. You're still doing the work in a different manner. And so I think it's really about designing the right structure to capture enough value, to capture value for yourself as an organization, and breaking free from these, the baggage, like the cultural or sector-related baggage that we have around what's possible in terms of scale and impact and earning a living and compensating the people on your team that are helping to make this thing happen. I think we can shed that and get rid of that. I think it's really, truly a matter of being smart just about how you get that job done. So impact, in fact, it shows, again, there's a lot of data on this that shows that it actually brings the people on your team and the people that you're telling your story of what you're going to go change in the world. It brings meaning and purpose and a lot of motivation and can actually be a huge asset. And when you think about, for example, great NGOs, great charities, they get people to work for free, volunteering. They get people to buy the product and give it to someone else, like I just described, right? More than half of nonprofits, at least in the US, have employees that give, more than half of employees give part of their salary back to the organization that's paying them in the first place. Show me businesses that can do those things. So it is possible, you can build community, you can build that in, but there are very truly pros and cons to any structure. So it's just a matter of being really smart about delivering the value. One more note on this, just to, I hope, push your thinking a little bit. The word, the language is different, but it's the same concepts. So just because we say, oh, this NGO or whatever is sustainable, yeah, that's profitable. That's the same, different words, same concept. And in fact, there's a greater discipline, I think, with NGOs because they have to. They're required legally to put that profit, the extra, back into the growth of the organization. Businesses only sometimes do that. Sometimes they take it off and go get a new car, right? So it's absolutely not the case that if you choose a path of impact, great, find the right vehicle, get in that vehicle and step on it. What else could we talk about that sounds interesting? Yes.
2 questions.
Yes.
First one is, what tools did you use for prevent fraud?
Oh, it's a great question. So what tools, for Kiva? Yeah. And just to be clear, I don't work full-time at Kiva anymore. I haven't for a decade, but I definitely have a lot of intel on founding years and the early years. So at that time, we operated on trust. We were building deep relationships with our partners all around the world, and we didn't have anything in place to protect against fraud. And then we got burned, right? We had one of our first partners in Uganda. They stole about $200,000. And I look back and I see all the things that we could have done better. But at that moment, it happened. The money never came back. They ran away with it. But what that forced us to do was say, okay, how can we make sure we do a test round with each partner that's highly monitored, audited, a lot of accountability, a lot of checks along the way. How do we grow slowly and organically, even if we had a lot of demand? How do we still grow in a way that's not putting too much pressure on the partner? How do we quantify the risk that's inherent with any of these transactions? And so we designed our own risk rating system. A lot of the industry 20 years ago, and even still today, a very small percentage of the microfinance institutions and non-bank financial institutions, the organizations that Kiva ended up partnering with, I should explain this too. At the beginning, it was direct, super, super simple, and over time, it's turned into, there are 4 components on Kiva. There's lenders, there's the platform itself, right, where you get to see different people that have different needs and business ideas, and then lenders contribute, say they're $25 there, and then it goes not just to the entrepreneur, but through one more step. 4 steps: lenders, Kiva, the lending partners, the microfinance institutions, et cetera, that I'm talking about, and then the borrowers. Let's say the borrower needs $100 and 4 lenders, pony up the capital, and let's say the institution that Kiva works with charges 15%. They will get their 100, and then they will pay back over time 115 to that microfinance institution. But as an incentive to work with Kiva and to keep the product very clear and straightforward, that institution keeps the 15 and just pays back the principal through Kiva and into the hands of lenders. So they get to access flexible, forgiving, zero interest debt capital, which is amazing for them, and it's what lenders are willing and happy to do. So back to that. Lenders, as they're looking at all the choices and understanding the microfinance institutional partner and the borrower, I think, again, it very well could have evolved, but we designed this risk rating system that rated the risk level of the country, of the institution, and of the borrower. I think that was all. There might have been a 4th layer. But so we communicated, hey, if this person defaults on the loan or something happens, we can't pay you back. So you're taking on default risk, you're taking on currency exchange risk. We just gave that to lenders, and lenders, because their heart is it's sort of a charitable mindset, they're just surprised that the money comes back at all. And a lot of lenders, I believe, operate like donors, and they're pleasantly surprised. They're delighted that the money does come back. So that is how we baked that system in to try to inform lenders that it's not going to be perfect. There could be defaults. There could be fraud. We do everything that we can along the way to prevent it. And it helped us, that first incident where there was fraud, it helped us grow up as an organization. And it was so heartbreaking, but also a really, really good lesson for us. Last piece on this, because I think it's a beautiful thing to learn too. We also, when we were very honest with lenders and said, hey, to hundreds of them, hey, sorry, but you're not going to get your money back. Here's what happened. We were very transparent, told the whole story, in as much as we thought people would be interested, and said, look, we're a young organization. We really trusted this person. They were an old friend from my original work and internship. And this is what happened. And we're so sorry. And now we're going to try to do things differently. We didn't get one angry note back, even though we lost hundreds of thousands of dollars for those lenders. We didn't get anybody who wrote back and said, well, I'm never lending again. If anything, people said, thanks for letting me understand what's happening. So that currency of just showing people, being transparent, being humble, it goes a long way for people. And I remember being terrified to hit send on that email and deliver the news. And it turned out that people came back with even more support. It was really beautiful. What is your second question?
What percentage of people default on their loans?
1.5% to 2% traditionally. And again, across the sector in general, across the microfinance sector, default rates are 5 to 10%-ish. Again, I'm not, my fingers are not on the pulse of exactly today what that stat is, but they're high anyway. I'm sorry, they're low. Repayment rates are high, default rates are low generally. I think on Kiva there's a few things going on. There's all this screening and vetting so that we're going to work with institutions that will have higher rates in general. But there is also this beautiful accountability and transparency that I think encourages borrowers. It's just anecdotally, but I've talked to so many borrowers who say something like, this isn't just a loan from a bank. These are people that know my story and care about me. I want to do well by them, and I want to get their money back. So I think it's pretty lovely to have that other layer of intention. So how are we on time? How are we doing? Do we have...
We overrun a little bit, but
okay.
The second speaker is like, I'm fine, I'm okay.
Oh, you're good.
I'm far too comfortable here.
Well, I'm happy to tap out.
You brought the entire credit department, right?
Let me jump into the...
Come on over.